Get out of the picture.
Is there any discussion going on? Because I can't hear a word. Okay, good. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Mr. Borton, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
All right,
Sorry about that.
we will go ahead and get started. Mr. Johnson, are we ready?
Mr. Mayor, we're ready.
Okay. Council called this meeting to order. For the record, it is February 9th, 2021 at 4:36 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton,
Here.
Councilwoman Perot,
Here.
Councilman Hoagland.
Here.
Councilman Burnt. Mayor Simison.
Here. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
move that we adopt the agenda as published.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and for the clerk to attest.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we will move on to item 16 under Department Commission Reports, which is, first up is the Transportation Commission 2020 end-of-year report. And I will turn this over to Chairman Steed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I appreciate having the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I am Walter Steed, and I am the chairman of the Transportation Commission effective January of 2021. I became a member of the TC in July of 2020, thanks to the nomination of the mayor and the consent of the council. Additionally, in 2020, Jared Smith had joined the Transportation Commission in May, and just last week we welcomed another new member, Zachary Shoemaker. In your packet is a month-to-month breakdown of what the commission did during 2020. We look at many specific issues, areas that are brought to our attention by the staff, by council members, by other entities, and the public. We review and recommend to the council the ACHA 5-year work plan for roadways, intersections, pathways, and community programs. We also interact with ITD, Compass, Valley Regional Transit regarding their actions and plans. Very importantly, in 2020, the Transportation Commission discussed its future role and how to expand its role in being helpful and relevant to the council and the community. These discussions led to the formation of 2 new standing committees. The first was a project review and ordinance committee, and the second, a development subcommittee. Their formation included purpose statements and assignment of members to each. These were in addition to the standing committee we've had for quite a while, which is the school zone subcommittee to look at issues in school zones. This past week, the commission formed a 4th standing committee to consider in depth the projects in order of the ACHA 5-year work plan. One issue the subcommittee, ordinance subcommittee looked at and then sent to the TC as a whole addressed at length a 2020 police department request for consideration of the issue of ATVs and UTVs on city streets. This past week, we held a public hearing on the proposed ordinance revision. And in light of the testimony we heard, we have returned it to the ordinance subcommittee for further consideration and clarification of the ordinance. We want to get this right before we send it forward to the council for their consideration, if we end up doing that at all. So you can look forward to hearing that in the future, or we may decide that it's not going to have a recommendation from us to move it to the council. In December, we saw, as the council did last month, an in-depth PowerPoint presentation by one of our members on the reasons for and construction of roundabouts and other methods of handling left-turning traffic. I've been familiar with roundabouts for years, but learned something from that presentation and reminded me of some of the terminology that's used in the trade. The Transportation Commission is very thankful to the amount of time and effort the city staff is willing to provide support to us. We appreciate their help, their guidance, and we want to thank the mayor and the council for allowing them to do this. We want to thank you for your support as well. With that, I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Mayor. I would like, by the way, I would like to recommend that if you haven't had a chance to read the item in the packet, that you do so. There's a great bit more detail in there than what I've given you this afternoon.
Thank you, Walter. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burke.
just a comment. Walter, thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate you being here. I know Councilman Cavanagh, the transportation liaison, isn't be able to be with us this afternoon, but wanted to extend our greatest thanks to you and your commission for all you do and your passion for transportation and for your desire to expand your role in our community. So I just, you could maybe extend thanks to the rest of your commissioners on behalf of the mayor and city council. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll be happy and be sure to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Walter. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Council, next up on our agenda is item 17, which is a continuation from last week's discussion regarding the ACHD 5-year work plan. I will turn this over to Miranda for any comments that she'd like to make as we go into this further for direction.
Hello. I received a few comments during the week from council persons as well as a few staff. So I've just brought back the list. I've added a few of the comments that I've received, and I'll just stand for any questions regarding or decisions regarding rearranging those items. I will note, as I was reviewing again, there was a project that was a duplicate in the community programs. So I would suggest that we combine 33 and 36 in the community programs. That was my error.
And could you take a second, just touch on any modifications that have been made?
Yes, so I have not made any modifications yet, but I will let you know some of the comments that I have received. We had the comments last week, just as a reminder, from Councilperson Strader to move some of the Oahe projects up possibly. There was also some discussion regarding moving the Linder Road overpass project up, and talking with staff. That's something that I believe we're in support of as a staff. It came up in the Transportation Commission discussion as well when they were doing that. So from staff, we're supportive of that if the council decides to switch the number 1 and number 2 projects. There was some question regarding moving some of the 10-mile projects down that are down in the south, moving those down on the list so that we can have more focus in our southeast and northwest quadrants of the city. And then there was also some discussion around moving a few items that are in the middle of the list up or down from Councilperson Perot.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
I did notice that the 10-mile and overland area projects had moved down to, in the list. And so I just was wondering if Miranda or you were able to share can you share some background on that? And then also I noticed that the Eagle, that it looks like at the very end of the list, 68 and 69, the Eagle Road and Amity intersections, those move down to the bottom of the list. Is that because those are already in process and so we don't need to put them in our higher priority?
Yes, Councilwoman. Those are in process. They will happen. The transportation discussion had some conversation regarding removing them from the request list because it is somewhat redundant. They're already programmed. They're going to happen. Decision was made to just move them down to the bottom of the list. Personal preference, I think it's easier to track things if they're not taken off the list until they're actually complete. So those were moved down to the bottom of the list.
And Councilman Pro, I don't know that any changes have been made, but one of the things I talked to Miranda about, I think on yesterday or Friday, I don't remember which one, but when we sent the letter to ACHD, I don't remember if it was us that sent it or the previous council. The years are kind of blending together, but we talked about making the Linder overpass a priority and deprioritizing the 10-mile area roadway projects, specifically south of Victory and 10 Mile. And so when I talked to Miranda, that was one of the things I thought we should discuss is if we send a letter saying the Linder is a priority and 10 Mile is not, shouldn't we adjust our priorities so that 10 Mile, so that it reflects what we stated in that letter at that time? The other item that I mentioned was specifically that segment that we have talked about on Lake Hazel between the park and Eagle Road, moving that up. And the place where I thought it made sense was putting it right there at the same area where we're talking about projects along USTIC. I think it was in 21, 22, somewhere, putting it at 20, just to kind of extend that conversation about prioritizing projects to Discovery Park as well as out to Oahe High School. At least puts it in the top 25, in my opinion, so it's on people's radar as something that we would like, because it's not going to be a huge project from all intents and purposes, and something that I think would make sense to highlight in a letter that we put it up there for, quite frankly, a small project when the opportunity arises from that standpoint. So as was mentioned, no changes have been made in terms of moving the 10-mile projects around on the list, to my knowledge, but that's really, I think, part of the question for council is where does 10 mile, should it reside on our list based upon our previous interactions with ACHD or communication to ACHD?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Perot.
just two questions for clarification. The Lake Hazel from Locust Grove to Eagle is not currently on the list at all, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
It is on the list in the community programs, I'm sorry, for improvements to the sidewalk and pathways, but not for road improvements.
I agree that should be, and that's a good location for that, because I do think the opportunity for us to potentially expand that section is going to come along sooner rather than later because of the developments that have been improved in there. So I'm in agreement with the mayor in that regard. Miranda, can you show us what is happening in what priorities is the 10-mile and Overland sections? I think we need to keep those in our priority list, but as far as 10-mile and Victory intersection goes, I'm comfortable with moving that down. I don't know if I want to take it completely off.
So right now, the 10-mile south of Overland, we've got them at 20, 36, 27, and then the 10-mile Overland is at 5.
Okay,
Yeah, our previous conversations was only for stuff south of Victory, as removing those from our
Okay.
priority, or moving those down from our priority.
So that would be just a misunderstanding on my part.
Mr. Mayor,
Are you able to see the map as well? Because I think that will help if is Zoom showing the map.
No, it's just showing your spreadsheet. Councilman Hoagland.
Mr. Mayor, just for discussion purposes, because of 10 Mile is a connection to the interstate, does that, should we keep things in the higher priority for 10 Mile just because development may follow that pathway as opposed to more interior roads? I don't know. That's why I'm asking, but what are thoughts on that?
I'll at least give you my viewpoint is we don't have anything that's been approved in that area south. It's primarily feeding up from CUNA. So if CUNA would like to prioritize those intersections, I think that that's great for them to do that. But from our standpoint, I think that there's much higher immediate needs than items 27 and 36 on our list at this point in time. 5 and 20, absolutely. But 36 and 27, not necessarily, in my opinion.
No, I appreciate that input, Mr. Mayor. It's just one of those things thinking through, we can try and figure it out, and we don't have any development activity going on there. That may change in the future. And we certainly do, I agree with you, have many higher priorities elsewhere where demand is past due for action.
Yeah, if you look at this map right now, items 49, 67, and 50 all have active development around them for us along Eagle Road. Or I'm sorry, is that Locust Grove? And Eagle, even 68, 66, 27, all those compared to 20, 36, and 27, which we really don't have any development in that area from our perspective. They're in our area of city impact. They do impact their regional network. But from my standpoint, our priority should be how to serve our residents first and foremost in the recommendations we make to ACHD, not necessarily the things that are going to benefit Nampa commuters that come in through that and get on the interstate at 10 Mile to bypass. There's nothing at Black Cat and Robinson to get onto the interstate. That's my viewpoint.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
can't disagree with that logic.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing Councilman Hoagland. So if he's able to speak up just a little bit more. Oh, would it
He said
be
I was-
okay? I'm
He
sorry.
said I was brilliant, just in case you were wondering.
Would it be okay for me to briefly go over the feedback that I had given to Miranda?
Absolutely, Councilman Pro.
Thank you. So I was looking along the priorities 12, 13, 14, potentially 15. And priority, 11, 12, 13, 14. Priority 11, 2020 priority 11, 10 Mile and Cherry Lane. I wanted to discuss discuss the location of that priority because that does feed down into the interstate, and that intersection is small and it's in poor condition. And I'm wondering if that should be in our top 10. And then also let me look at my list very quickly here. Oh, I wanted to prioritize Eagle and Overland, number 12, below 13 and 14. So my opinion and thoughts on that is, and again, I realize the Transportation Commission has taken several variables into account that I might not be aware of. So just want to preface that, but McMillan Road in that entire 2 mile stretch of 13 and 14 has no sidewalks, there's open waterways, there's safety issues, there's schools, there's pedestrian issues. And the intersection of Eagle and Overland, which is priority 12, while there may be quite a bit of traffic there, I have more concerns about the expansion of McMillan than I do about Eagle and Overland and having additional turn lanes added in there. So just curious if there's any other thoughts from my fellow council members on that. It's my understanding that these aren't prioritized by the Transportation Commission based on ACHD's funding, that there's not necessarily a financial component to it. It's purely based on, need, traffic count, community feedback, and those kinds of things.
Thank you. And this has been my understanding. And Miranda, you are welcome to, say that I'm not correct. But generally, the way Caleb has explained it to me is the top 5 are really what ACHD is likely to put a lot of weight into, and then it's your 6 through 25. How they're prioritized by the city within that group is not really as important or as relevant, because at the end of the day, they're going to look at cost, effort, et cetera, in those groupings. So whether they're 10 or 11 or whatnot, the fact that they're in those areas, but that's how it's been explained to me in the past, that it may be okay for us, but it's not going to necessarily impact ACHD's decision unless all things were 100% equal in 2 projects. Now Miranda can say if she disagrees with that, but just so we're aware, generally.
Mayor, councilpersons, I would say generally I agree with that. I would, in my past experience doing this with the school districts and then being on the Transportation Commission in the past, my opinion would be the top 10 rankings are the most crucial, and then 11 through 20, 25. Where they fall between 11 through 25 is not as crucial as just the fact that they're in there in the top 25. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pearl.
I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly what you're saying is they're going to look at this list and they're going to pay less concern to where we ranked it in the top 10 or the top 25, and more specific to what are the projects and how do they fall into the plan they already have, what they already have scheduled in their 5-year plan. Is that right?
That is correct, Councilwoman Perot.
Okay.
They have a scoring system that they use. Our ranking is just one piece of that scoring system. So we give our ranking and we get points for our top 10. We actually get points for every project that's on the list, but they're weighted based on where they fall. So we have significantly higher points for the top 10. And then after that, the points start to even out. And we do use this list for other things as well. So we like to keep all of our priorities in order, but just keep in mind that after you get past about the top 10, the points don't vary much.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
Miranda, do you have, that's a great point you just brought up. Do you have or I guess last year's ACHD report and point scale on our roadways? It sort of shows how our top 10 were scored and kind of the weight of those scores in relation to the cost and the safety component and the other factors. I think it helps illustrate.
So I don't have that, but I do have our last year's rank. So are you asking for their full? They do a priority workshop similar to what we're doing with all the projects in the county, where they look at how each program ranked them, each agency ranked them, and then they add that into their calculations of how they're going to rank them. So I don't have all of those calculations of theirs.
Okay. That's what I was referencing, that it shows the weight in relation to the other factors that you were describing.
I would venture to say very generally that you can look at the years and get an idea of where they prioritized things. If it's a high priority, then it will be coming soon or already in progress. If it was a lower priority, it will be further out in years. And if it wasn't a priority for them at all, it won't be programmed. Or I guess I should say, if it was just a very low priority for them, it won't be programmed.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
Miranda, I was trying to find, and the only one I found was a number 29 for the 2021 year, Cherry Lane and Black Cat Road, which refers to the intersection being widened. But is there anything for Black Cat from Cherry to Franklin? We've got Compass School there, and ACHD has right away from Franklin up almost to that point, but there's just huge backups there during the school year, people trying to get out. There's no turn lanes whatsoever on any of that stretch. People trying to get in and out of subdivisions. In fact, I think Councilman Perot, you probably access that more than I do. And it seems like there should be something there, and I couldn't find anything, but maybe I missed that. Is there anything for that stretch of road?
Mr. Mayor, councilpersons, the Black Cat stretch does have some projects that rank lower down in the 60s. We have the intersections generally higher up. They're at Ustick and Black Cat and Cherry and Black Cat. We also have McMillan and Black Cat coming in at 39, so about mid-list. The actual road improvements, which are these red squares, can you see the map now?
We can, yes.
The actual road improvements here are down in the 60s.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
thank you. Miranda, does the transportation take ACHD's, is there, how do I ask this? Are they taking into account the likelihood that ACHD is going to approve a project and in their ranking decisions? Or is it just purely like what we as a city think needs to be done? Or is the fact that, that section of road, I know that ACHD has, the 2026 to 2031 plan already decided. So are they looking at that and including that in their decisions?
Mr. Mayor, councilpersons, I would say there are some that are looking at that, but generally it falls lower on the list of criteria that they're using to rank their priorities. We use this list for more than just this purpose, and we really want it to be a list of what the city's actual priorities are without trying to play into any kind of scoring games. for lack of a better way to put that. I do know there was discussion about moving the Linder Overpass Road to number 1 at the Transportation Commission. And it was brought up that because it is such a costly program and the likelihood of it happening sooner, that's why they opted to leave it at number 2 rather than have it be number 1. So that factor does come in, but I would say it comes in almost as a tiebreaker. I wouldn't put it high in the list of criteria.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Perot.
Wow, I just have a lot to say this evening. So I agree with Councilman Hoagland. That section, which is number 61, it looks like. I don't know what to think about that. That section is, I agree, there's every time we've done a development in that area and we've approved one and we've done several, I feel like I've kind of been a broken record and said, hey, this is an unsafe stretch. Hey, this is an unsafe stretch. We've got an Idaho Power substation. We've got a school. We have no sidewalks. We have ditches. And now many people are using that section of Black Cat to bypass 10 Mile Road because it gets backed up in the morning pretty significantly on 10 Mile. So, however, we have other areas of the city that have the same challenges. So, what comes to mind, of course, are these stretches of McMillan. Where with the same situation, there's canals, there's no sidewalks, there's residences, there's children, there's schools. So I don't really know how to rank that in relationship to, I guess, traffic counts would be, and of course we can't do that here in this meeting, but I know there's definitely a need there. It's just, it sounds like the 60s are not something that we need to worry too much about at the moment.
Well, Councilman Perot, maybe I could recommend with the Transportation Commission plan to take a year-long look at this issue. I mean, to your point, I think even if we moved it up to 30 or 20, it's not going to impact the likelihood the ACHD would consider these projects in this next 5-year work plan. But if we want to give some criteria for the Transportation Commission to look at for this next year in some of these areas, what would that be? And I don't know how often ACHD would even go out and do a traffic count to get an updated one. And quite frankly, with COVID, I don't know that we know what our traffic volumes or patterns really are yet. I think that they're going to change dramatically in this next year with new schools opening, as you just mentioned, in these areas, and people starting to work. So it probably does, the entire list probably does need to have another set of eyes long-term in looking at these and finding those criteria. So that's what I would suggest we do, is we really punt some of this to next year, but Miranda's heard it, to look at these items to see what we might want to consider.
Mr. Mayor, councilpersons, I would also say that it's not necessarily traffic counts, but traffic flow. If you look at the level of service map that's in your packet, it also shows if the road is operating at a C or better. So if it's in the green, ACHD very generally says it's operating well. I wouldn't put a huge weight on that as a criteria because it is very general map. But again, it's a good one to use for tiebreakers, in my opinion, when you're looking at a few projects and trying to decide which ones can rank higher. Looking at projects that have E's and F's on the level of service could be lower, or I'm sorry, could be higher priorities.
And Miranda, how often do they update or take a look at those specific issues?
I'm not sure how often they are updating that, Mr. Mayor, but I do know that the one that we received was from December of 2020. So it was very recent.
Yeah, I can only speak for myself driving around. Locust Grove used to be a problem coming from Victory to Overland because of Mountain View High School. I have not seen a backup on that road all year, and so I don't really think we understand yet what the status of all of our roadways are, and we may not see that, and quite frankly, until August of next year, until we've added 7,000 to 10,000 people or more and those trips in our community and see what the impacts of the road improvements have been in the schools and with the Waihi opening and how that's going to change everyone's traffic pattern. It is a great time to really delve into this a little bit deeper and reevaluate these priorities as our patterns are going to change, quite frankly.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I think it speaks to those peak hours, especially for schools, and that's why I brought up Compass, because of no turn lane, and with our approval of a development between Franklin and the railroad tracks, they have right of way. In fact, when they redid the intersection there, they went almost to the turn for the schools. And it looked, from what I remember Ryan telling us, they actually had the right of way for the two houses that are between the expansion of the roadway to the intersection of the school. And now the right of way is in their possession for Hensley Station, which goes to the railroad track. So it's just one of those things. And I know they want to go in, it's more cost efficient to do the whole road on both sides and all that. But there are some areas we just need them to take a look at. Can they do just a turn lane there by just expanding on right of way that they already have? So it's a difficult thing. I know it's hard, and there's so many priorities that are well deserving, but that's just one that's just like, wow, we have a school and no turn lanes, and it's just those peak periods that it's just really a bottleneck. So, and it doesn't meet the same level of service as some of those that are in red, but just looking at those things, if there's money somewhere to fix a few things, just turn lanes can be a big help. So.
Thank you. For the record, Councilman Cavanagh joined us at 5:08 p.m. So council, with what you've heard so far, do you feel like there's enough direction for Miranda to finalize this list? We need to start moving things around? What is the comfort level of council at this point in time with modifications that they feel are necessary?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
yep, I'm comfortable with the list. I think just a lot of good work and thought has gone into its review and development and the recommendations of the commission as well. So I'm comfortable with it. Understanding we can move the pieces around in perpetuity. There's just limited resources with unlimited need.
Councilman Borton, can I ask, would you be comfortable with moving down the 10 mile and moving up that one section for Amity? Or would you prefer not to have any modifications?
Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at it now. What remind me of the numbers from the 2021 priority ranking? What would be switching?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Miranda.
the project number 20, 10 Mile to Victory, would be moved down to the mid-30s. And project number 27, 10 Mile to Amity, would be moved down to the mid-30s. There's also discussion of moving the first and second project. I believe those are the only two kind of outstanding discussion topics of, do we switch number 1 and number 2? And do we move those two 10-mile projects down?
And move in the Amity section up to roughly around 20.
Lake Hazel.
Or sorry, Lake Hazel, thank you.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification. I don't have any concern with those changes. I understand the reasoning behind it, so that makes sense.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I'm in favor of moving the Lake Hazel project up and the 10-mile projects down. One thought of mine in regard to 1 and 2, if there's one thing that we're all in agreement on, it is that overpass should be one of our biggest priorities. And so I would support moving the overpass to number 1, knowing that Locust Grove Road, Victory Road, Overland Road, which is currently number 1, make that like a 1B. Two's fine. I don't know if it's really going to make a huge difference, but I do believe that overpass is our biggest transportation point. And so I moved that to number one, even with the complications that come with it. I think it sends a message that is our number one priority. And so that would be my point. And great job to the commission. Great job, Miranda. This was a great document every year. You guys always do a fantastic job putting it together. So thanks. I appreciate your time.
Councilman Hoagland?
I'm fine with moving Lake Hazel up and the two 10-mile ones down on the list, as we've discussed. As far as moving the overpass up to number one, I guess I kind of liken it to having the top two picks in the draft. And what we have for number two, is it one that we can sign? Not really. So why would we want it to be number one? But I don't have a real issue with it being number one. 1 and 2, that gets all the attention. Again, going back to draft picks, they garner a lot of attention, and this would garner a lot of attention, whichever one is 1 or 2. So I'm fine with either, whatever the council's preference is on that. So.
Councilman
Mr. Mayor.
Cavanagh? Councilman Cavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. I too, I'm supportive of moving down those 10-mile projects. I think that has you may have already touched on this, a much larger impact on CUNA residents than it does Meridian residents. And to me, that makes the most sense. And certainly moving the Lake Hazel piece up also makes sense. I think from a pure argument sake, to Councilmember Burnt's point, Linda Road should be our number one. I think that if you poll the council, you poll our community, many of them are going to be talking about Linda Road long before they're going to be talking about Victory and Locust Grove as our community's primary needs. So I think moving it up to number one, even if it's done ceremoniously, I'm supportive of it.
Councilman Pro, any last comments?
Yes. So this may be a really simple question. I'm just trying to understand how everything is done. Miranda, so I guess it hasn't, all the times I've reviewed these, it hasn't made sense to me why we would prioritize projects that they already have they already have planned and they already have funded. Why are we not prioritizing what isn't already in there? Are we just basically saying, hey, we agree with you that we're still good with these projects that you already have in your plan? Help me understand why, it's not going to change. If we say that number 5 is our number 5 priority, they already have a plan for it. It's the planning's already been done, the design's already been done. They already know when they're going to fund it. Why do we bother to prioritize it?
Mr. Mayor, council persons, I will say that some of that is accurate. If it's programmed to begin design in the next 2 to 3 years, or design has already happened, more than likely it's not going to fall off of that list. It's not going to become unprogrammed. But there are occasions when something is programmed out into the future and it gets bumped down, becomes unprogrammed. I don't have a specific example, but I can tell you it's a possibility that an item gets dropped off if the design isn't for another 5 or 6 years.
And I would just say, Councilman Pro, to a certain extent, yes, it is to say that we are in alignment and agreement, but it also does help protect if they've got to make modifications or changes. If we take something that was 5 and we move it down to 11 and they've got to balance their budget, you potentially are pushing those projects out further. So it does have a little bit of that impact.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Perot, I will also say we do use this list for other activities and when we're looking at what are the city's priorities. So we use this list for ACHD's prioritization, but we also use it throughout the year and share it with our citizens that these are our priorities for them and from them.
Thank you.
So I have made the changes that were requested and sound like they were generally agreed upon. And those are here on the screen. You won't see the 10 mile, but I did move those down to the mid 30s, and I can scroll down if anyone wants to see those.
Council, I don't think that we need an official action from you on this. My office will work with Miranda and we'll transmit under a letter, and we'll highlight in the letter the changes that we made and why, so that they're relevant to the conversation. But we will get this transmitted. And we'll have a more robust review of everything next year, and maybe it's even something that will come back sooner before ACHD asks if the Transportation Commission needs any input from council as they start reviewing stuff. So,
It's a good idea.
all right. Thank you very much,
Thank
Miranda.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Brenda.
Linda.
Council, we're on to item 18.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061F.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion, a second, to go into executive session. So clerk, call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton,
Hi.
Cavanagh,
Aye.
Perot.
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
Burnt.
All ayes, motion carries, and we are recessed into we are in executive session. have any other council members remote who are present?
I'm here, Mayor.
Here.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we come out of executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion second, come out of executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burke.
I move that we adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion to, and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Council, I will call the meeting to order for the record, February 9th, 2021 at 6 p.m. We will begin this evening's agenda with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Borton,
Here.
Councilman Cavanagh,
Here.
Councilwoman Perot,
Here.
Councilman Hoagland,
Here.
Councilman Burnt, Mayor Simison.
Here. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item is the community invocation, which tonight will be given by Vinnie Hankey with Value Life Community Church. If you all would please join us in the community invocation or take this as a moment of silence and reflection.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, it's good to be in the building with you for the first time. Thank you
Nice
for your
to meet you.
hospitality and allowing me to come and pray for you and for our city. Let's do that. God, we thank you for the opportunity to be meeting in this place. We thank you for the way that you continue to govern and sovereignly rule over all of our lives. God, we lift up the City Council members to you this evening. We ask that you might continue to protect them. You might grant unto them wisdom and discernment as they consider the items on their agenda. God, would each of them consider it a privilege and a humble blessing to serve the city. We pray for its citizens, for its teachers, for its students, for its healthcare workers. God, for all those who have suffered and endured during this pandemic. We thank you for the steadfast leadership of the City Council and pray that you might continue to bless them in it. We ask these things through Christ. Amen. Thank you.
Mr. Hankey? Mr. Hankey? Do you have a City of Meridian pin? I don't think so.
I do not. No, sir.
We'd like to just a small token of our appreciation. Thanks for showing up in person. Next item is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
we got our business covered in our workshop executive session, so I move that we take off item 6 in our executive session. With that, I move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion is adopted and the agenda is agreed to. Next item is a proclamation for Black History Month, and I'll go down to the podium and ask President Taylor with the Treasure Valley chapter of the NAACP to join me there. So, Council, this is Black History Month, and to my knowledge, this is the first time we've celebrated Meridian with the proclamation for Black History Month, but during the actions which occurred during this last year, it was an opportunity to open doors for several of us here at the city and create relationships with members of our community, specifically President Taylor. And so we're going to read a proclamation and then ask him to say a few remarks in celebration of this month. So whereas during Black History Month, we honor and celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by African Americans to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas Black History Month grew out of the establishment in 1926 of Negro History Week by Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And whereas the 2021 national theme for the observance is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. And whereas the observance of Black History Month calls our attention as a community to the need to have a society that stands up in support of the lives of all of its citizens and lives up to our democratic ideals. And whereas we are all able to live better lives and have a brighter future thanks to the contributions that have been made of African Americans in our community, state, and nation. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simison, hereby proclaim February 2021 is Black History Month in the city of Meridian and encourage the residents of our community and communities across the country to learn more about and celebrate the diverse heritage and culture of African Americans and continue our efforts to create a world that is more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all, dated this 9th day of February, 2021. So thank you very much for being here and would love to have you say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. It is indeed a pleasure that you invited me to this meeting tonight, and I have a few comments that I want to make concerning that. You know, as we talk about the Black History Month theme is the Black family. So, you know, the story and the history of the Black History Month begins in 1915, a half a century after the 13th Amendment was written, abolishing slavery in the United States. By the late 1960s, thanks partly to the civil rights movement, then President Gerald R. Ford officially recognized Black History Month in 1976. The 2021st Black History Month theme is Black History Family, representation, identity, and diversity. This is a theme which emphasizes just how abstract notion of family can be, that the experience of Black families in particular are not a monolithic. History, the literature, the visual arts and film study, psychology, anthropology, and social policy, representation, identity, and diversity has been referenced, stereotyped, vilified from the days of slavery to our own time. Black family known no single location, since family reunions and genetic ancestry searches testify to the spread of family members across states, nations, and even continents. Not only are the individual Black family diasporic, but Africa and the diaspora itself has been long portrayed as a Black family at large. While the roles of the Black family has been described by some as a microcosm of the entire race, its complexity and the foundation of African American life and history can be seen in numerous debates over how to represent the meaning, and typically from a historical perspective, as a slave or a free person, as a single-headed family or a dual-headed family, as extended or nuclear, as fictive, kin, or blood lineage, as legal or common law, and as Black or interracial. Variations appear as well in discussions on the nature and impact of parenthood, childhood, marriage, gender norms, sexuality, and incarceration. The family offers a rich tapestry of images for exploring the African American past and present. But despite the negative pathological images of Black families portrayed in the 19th centuries, justification for slavery, and in the 20th century, government policy reports, the march of time has proved that the Black family best represent the source of perseverance, resilience that brought African American through centuries of enslavement, Jim Crow law, Black codes, and glaring racial inequalities and dangers that continues to this day. I'm particularly heartened by the fact that the city of Meridian make this, some would say, a small step, but I would say this is a giant step. It being the first time that in our memory that this has happened. It tells me that there's a change coming. People realize that there's a change. And I'm so thankful for you, Mayor, and you, the City Council, for taking your time out and trying to show the African American community or communities of color that you recognize their contribution to our society. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the time and the efforts that you put into this. Thank you very much.
Just thank you, President Taylor, for those kind remarks, as well as the sharing some of the history for us here. That's what this month is really about, educating, taking those small steps, long overdue steps. So also a little City of Meridian pin for you real quick. And Chris, can we get one more quick picture? Because just with the proclamation in front, we'll just step around.
President Taylor, before you leave, thanks for coming. Hey, let Vic and Willie and the others know how much we appreciate what you guys do.
Okay, council, moving on. Public forum, do we have anyone sign up into the public forum?
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to action items for this evening then. Our first action item up is a request for withdrawal of an application for, we'll just say H 2020-0108. And I will turn this over to Joe. Mr. Dodson, you're muted.
And he's talking about how, like, despite all of that, they're having steps forward.
We need you to get closer. Hard to hear you.
Mayor, this is the first time the city of Meridian has ever recognized Black issue on it. So, yeah, I was like, President Taylor, I just really appreciate it. And this means a lot.
Joe, we can't hear you. Try harder.
But he's like, it feels like it's a big step. Cool.
Joe? Joe, are you there? Joe, did you just unmute yourself?
Sorry, yes, I apologize. Was I needed?
There you go. We're good to go.
Thank you. I apologize. I missed what was happening right now.
Okay, just turned it over to you to discuss the request for withdrawal of H
Yes.
2020-0108.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the applicant, after discussion with staff and following the commission hearing and recommendation of denial, they are hoping to withdraw their application so that they can kind of go to the drawing board with myself and the rest of planning staff, especially long range and economic development, and try to develop a site plan and overall comprehensive plan of this area to the north and west of the Walmart on 10 Mile, and just bring a better plan forward to planning and zoning. Rather than a remand, they want to withdraw it so that they can have more open conversations and not be tied to what has already been presented.
Okay. Thank you. Council, do you have any questions? Okay. Is the applicant's representative present, or do they want to make any comments?
I do not believe they are present.
They are not present. Council, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
when we withdraw this application, do we, is there a date that we need to use, or do we just, is a withdrawal sufficient?
Mr. Members of the council, you just need to accept the withdrawal.
Okay. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
I move that we accept the withdrawal of application for Vicenza North Subdivision, H-2020-0108.
Mr. Mayor, I second the motion.
I have a motion, a second, to accept the withdrawal. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton,
Aye.
Cavanagh,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Hoagland,
Aye.
Burnt.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is withdrawn. Next up is a public hearing for Teethboro Crossing Subdivision, H-2020-0112. We'll open this public hearing with staff comments. I'll turn this over to Alan.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Alan Tiefenbach, Associate Planner with the City of Meridian. This is an annexation of zoning and a preliminary plat. The property is a little more than 7.5 acres. It's zoned RUT in an unincorporated Ada County. It's located northeast of North Linder and West Ustick Road. West of the property is zoned CC, currently vacant. It's also R15 to the west. And the Edicting Commons, which I'll talk about in a minute, is what you see at the R15 there to the west, recently approved. Vacant to the east, vacant to the north. There's 3 parcels to the north. All 3 of them are owned by the same person. Those are all vacant, and it's about 4.5 acres. To the east, there's 2 different owners. Those properties, one of them is in the city directly adjacent, and then on the other side of that is still within the county. Those are approximately 3.5 acres. A little bit of history on this. There was a previous proposal to annex this and rezone it to R8. This was in 2006. It was to allow 35 single-family lots. This was subsequently denied by council. Probably the biggest reason is because at the time it was believed that it was piecemeal development, which it was. They didn't have much infrastructure in place, and other things hadn't developed at that time. At this time, however, city property has been annexed to the south, to the east, and to the west of the property. The property directly to the north yet has not been annexed. Property is recommended for medium density residential, which is 8 to 12 dwelling units per acre. Again, this is a proposal for annexation, rezoning to R8, and a preliminary plat to allow 46 building lots and 8 common lots. Probably easier to see the color pictures, which is why I put this one up here. Talk about access. The development proposes 5 points of access. There's 3 stubs. There is a stub to West Woodpine here to the west. There is a stub to the east here, and there is a stub to the north here. 2 points of these access are from existing streets. That would be West Woodpine. I just lost my cursor, which is here. There is also a existing point of access from West Ustick Road. The present access from West Ustick occurs at Llama Lane, which you can't really see here. Llama Lane is more over towards the middle, and that's existing right now. There's a curb cut, or excuse me, there's an access there. North Llama Lane is going to be closed as part of this development, and the new access, which is the one you see here, Northwest 12th, this is going to be pushed over to the east, and it's going to line up with Northwest 12th, which is down here to the south. ACHD supports this access. Usually they don't support accesses occurring off of arterials, but in this particular case, first of all, this will be lining up with an existing access across the street, which is a better situation. Also, the roads are being pushed further to the east, so it's increasing the intersection spacing from what it already was. So it's not ideal at the 1320, but ACHD supports this because it's taking a not good situation and making it better. West Ustick is already improved with 5 travel lanes, bike lanes, vertical curb and gutter, and 5-foot wide detached concrete sidewalk abutting the site. The applicant will be required to construct all roads, the internal roads, to 33-foot templates per the ACHD standards. Again, like I said, 5-foot sidewalks are proposed on all sides of this development. And there's one common driveway that's proposed with this development, and that's what you see down here to the southwest. The development proposes 15% open space. This includes several small landscape sections which are on either side of this northern stub. There is a 25-foot buffer along West Ustick. Some of that can be credited. There are several pathway common lots. One of those lots you can see here. There's another pathway common lot here, and there's 2 pathways at this central open space. 13.5% of this space would meet the requirements for qualified open space. This includes that central park that you see there at the middle. Again, half of the buffer and this pet amenity and seating area, which is here. In addition, they've included an extra pathway connection. They're only really required to provide some along the streets. In this particular case, they've tied into a ditch, which is at the east. I'll talk about that very quickly. So this central open space is just slightly less than an acre. It has a playground and 2 pathway connections. This meets the minimum requirements of 50 by 100 feet, which it's actually much larger than that. So it is quality open space. It's a recreational amenities, and then the additional 20,000 square feet, because this is much bigger than what's required, that additional 20,000 square feet is credited as an additional amenity. The Central Park, like I said, exceeds the minimum landscape requirements and also it exceeds the landscape requirements of 1 deciduous shade tree per 8,000 square feet. It also contains 2 pathways that connect to an existing pathway along an existing ditch. So here to the east, running along this ditch, is an existing pathway, and that is owned by the HOA to the east. This ties into that pathway, and this pathway then connects to a regional pathway that is north from there. Because the pathways meet the minimum landscaping requirements, they're not required sidewalks, and they connect to the existing pedestrian pathway and the bicycle routes. These would also be credited as an amenity. So they're actually proposing twice as many amenities as they would be required. There's existing trees that meet the requirements for preservation and mitigation, particularly in the vicinity of the ditch, which you can see there. The city arborist has noted that there are some preliminary discussions going on about which tree should be preserved. Although we've not yet received a tree mitigation plan, this will be required with the final plat. The applicant has submitted sample building elevations with this proposal. These single-family homes are depicted as 2-story structures with 2-car garages and a variety of architectural elements and finished materials, including gabled roofs, dormer, stone wainscoting. Some of these houses will be very visible from West Ustick. Staff recommended a condition on the development agreement that the rear and sides of 2-story structures visible from West Ustick would incorporate minimum architectural requirements. The Planning Commission heard this item on January 7th. At the public hearing, the Planning Commission moved to approve the subject annexation. There was one citizen that showed up and identified himself as Rick Wagner, who is the owner of the property directly to the east. He had really was more informational questions. He wanted to make sure that the ditches were not going to be interrupted or impacted. He also requested that the applicant construct some kind of barrier along the eastern property line. The commission, one of their comments, and I'll sort of back up here if I can. One comment of the or question of the commissioners was whether or not this open space backed directly to adjacent houses to the east. It does not. There is a common lot that is to the east. It's owned by the HOA and then the houses. So there is some space between where this open space is going to be and where existing houses are. Probably the biggest, well, I'll come back to that. There was also some discussion in regard to the property owner to the north and what kind of impacts this would have. The applicant's representatives talked to the property owner to the north, and they agreed to keep houses to 1 story on the northern lot. So that would be lots 2 through 5 on block 2, which is what you see here to the north. So the development agreement would limit these only to 1 story to reduce impacts to the north. There was also a condition by the Planning Commission that was added to add vinyl fencing along the border. So the vinyl fencing would basically come from where the park is south and then from where the park is north. I believe the applicant is amenable to that. Probably the biggest issue of discussion with the Planning Commission was how this property interacts with the property to the west. If you remember, I mentioned that there's a property that's, well, there's Edicting Commons to the northwest. Then there is a commercial zoned property that's directly to the west. At one time, there was a townhouse project that was proposed there. That project ultimately did not happen, so it's still a vacant property. There was quite a bit of discussion about this. The Planning Commission wanted the council to know that this was an issue that they had significantly discussed. They were concerned about what kind of development potential would be on this western lot if there was not a connection provided from this lot to the subject property. The applicant, after planning, so they wanted that to go to the council, so the council knew that they had a concern about that, even though they really didn't make a recommendation other than they wanted the council to know they had a concern with that. Following the council meeting, the applicant held a meeting with ACHD to talk about that issue. ACHD did not want to see a connection to this western lot. They had issues with cut-through access. Originally, I know there was some discussions about self-storage and some other things there, but ACHD is not amenable to that connecting. Also, there's a development agreement that's already in place for the property to the west, and that development agreement does not require an access to the east. So again, staff does acknowledge the council or the Planning Commission had some issues. The applicant also understands that the Planning Commission had some issues, and they did have quite a lengthy meeting with ACHD. And it is our opinion that, and as well as ACHD's opinion, that that should not be connected. With that, staff recommends approval of this annexation, zoning and preliminary plat with the conditions that are listed in the staff report. I'll stand for any questions if you have any, council.
Thank you, Alan. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Pro.
Well, Alan, where do I start? I've heard applications on this corner, both when I was a planning and zoning commissioner, and I've heard too, I think, city council, something like that. Each and every time we have a conversation about this, we do have discussions about what's happening with the surrounding properties. So my question for you is if I remember correctly, the residential development that was approved that's currently in development to the northwest does have a stub street that would allow the commercial development directly to the west to exit. Is that right? Because I don't think that ACHD was allowing any kind of exit from that commercial piece onto Linder Road at any point.
That's my understanding. The connection wouldn't come directly from this property. The connection would come through the Edicting Commons into this property. That's that stub that you see to the north and the west.
So if ACHD's, perhaps I'm not understanding their concern about pass-through traffic in a neighborhood, whether it comes through the east or whether it comes through the north, or we have pass-through traffic in a neighborhood from that commercial piece.
I'm not sure if I have a quick answer to that question, council person.
And we do have Christy is here from ACHD. Perhaps that'd be a question better suited for her to answer.
Thank you.
Christy, if you're with us, I don't know if you have any comments.
Sorry about that. I'm making dinner while I'm also attending your wonderful city council meeting. So the question was the access to the east, because that goes into a residential development.
To the west, ma'am.
To the west.
Yeah, whether or not the Edicting Commons would allow access from the commercial lot and why that's not an issue versus the pass-through traffic from the property to the west directly.
That is likely something I would have to touch base with the planner on this application. I wasn't involved in those conversations with the developer on this one. So, and there's nothing in the staff report that talks about that. So that's something I apologize. I would have to get back with you guys on.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
Councilman
Mayor.
Burr.
I think Councilwoman Perot just won the game Stump ACHD for the evening.
Woohoo!
Good job.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Pro.
Not to get too lengthy with this, but this, yeah, I mean, and Councilman Burnt can testify, how many times have we, I think you also were still on planning and zoning when we were hearing this too. And just to put this out there, I know we're not in deliberation yet, but I have great concerns about what this does to the surrounding property. So yeah, if, I don't know if there's probably unlikely a possibility we'll get a response to that this evening, but I think that's a really critical piece to this decision this evening. So, and one more question for Alan, if I may. So I saw in the file that there was like a possible layout for some residential lots with the property to the north. It was like here's a potential design that we could have. And it sounds like the applicant has had conversations with the owner to the north. Is there any additional information you can share with us? Because I didn't see any written comments in the file that where the property owner to the north said, yeah, I'm in agreement or I approve, or hopefully we have some of the neighbors here this evening. I really would like to hear from them directly as well.
Sure, councilperson. Yes, there was a concept plan that we asked the applicant consider when they did this about how the property actually could develop to the north. I would have to defer to the applicant for any additional information about any communications that you've had with the property to the north. I'm not aware of those, no.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
just to continue the discussion about the property immediately to the west and the commercial area that was approved, if my memory serves right, they had an access off of Ustick Road because it was very, very close to the turn lane where you turn to go south on Linder. But you had enough room just to clear that to access that commercial area. So they had their own access point, and I think the question was, does this, then you have almost like a interconnection, which ACHG does not want to have. And Alan, I don't know if you were here for that on that development, but that's my recollection, that they had their own Ustick access point, and then they had an exit out of to Linder. Like I said, I don't know if you were there for that.
I wasn't there for that. I'm looking at the plat right now for Edicting Commons to see if I can come up with an answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Joe.
Sorry, I happen to be privy to a little bit of information on that corner because I have pre-upped on that corner probably 6 times now with different projects. So Councilman Hoagland is correct that there is a access to Ustick. It'd be a limited access right in, right out that ACHD has given preliminary approval for, and it was approved as part of the existing development agreement. However, they show an access to Linder, but it's my understanding, as other council members have said, that access to Linder is not guaranteed for that corner parcel, and that they are required to end the stub from the Edicting Commons on their site in some way. My discussions with the applicant or potential applicant for that corner is that they need to discuss with ACHG whether any access to Linder will be allowed, or they will have to go through Edicting Commons. But minimally, I'm under the understanding that they will have an access to Ustick. So hopefully that helps out Alan and the rest of you guys on your project here.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Council, everyone clear on this as much as me?
Mr. Mayor, clear as mud.
Exactly. Council, any further questions for staff at this time? Okay. With that, I ask the applicant to come forward and state name and address for the record and be recognized for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Tim Makwa with Hayden Homes, 1406 North Main Street, Meridian, 83642. And I think I can shed a little bit of light on both of those issues that we were talking about earlier. I believe Alan's pulling up a PowerPoint that I had put together just to show a couple of exhibits. I'm going to try to be brief here. I think a couple of the points that have already been raised are things that I wanted to highlight as well. So I don't think there's any reason to go back through the entire staff report. We're in agreement on all of the conditions of approval. There has been quite a bit of communication with the neighbors on this project, both the HOA to the east, as well as the Mr. and Mrs. Lloyd to the north. And here we go. Touchy. So let me first show you this aerial photo. One of the items that was questioned just now, and I wanted to ask if you guys have the ACHD memo email that's sort of characterizes or summarizes our meeting with ACHD following Planning and Zoning Commission. Was that entered into the packet?
It was. That meeting, that correspondence was in the case file and it was linked to the staff report.
So just paraphrasing, ACHD does not support extension of this, of what we have as a shared driveway and a pathway. I don't know if I can point with this. I can't point at a screen with my laser pointer, and this thing is really sensitive. But this shared drive here, it's a shared drive to 3 lots, and there's a pathway and landscaping along there. ACHD does not support that as extension. We do not support that either. This is an infill site, 7.5 acre size, and we've already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 access points in that 7.5 acres. From our perspective, while I understand some of the concerns of this property to the corner, it should not be our sole responsibility to ensure that a property that doesn't even have an application in place right now is developable. I do understand your concerns and that is a difficult property. To answer one of the questions, there are currently 2, and if I can't really zoom in, but where my cursor is right now, is that showing on your screen? There's an existing curb cut approach there, and there's an existing curb cut approach here, as well as the Edicting Commons stub here. In our meeting with ACHD following Planning and Zoning Commission, they're not going to be totally committed to the long-term, staying, I guess, of these 2 approaches until they've seen a layout and an application. But in the ACHD email, they mentioned that one of those accesses may have to be closed at some point in the future. So depending on what they submit, they've got 2 approaches that ACHD is going to honor depending on what they submit. They've also got this other access through Edicting Commons. So I guess that's my summary or how I would respond to those questions. If there's a follow-up question on that, I'd be happy to try to answer it, but that's kind of where we stand. And it seemed, from our meeting and from the email that ACHD submitted, that they're in agreement that bringing this traffic through this small area of residential here is not a good mix. The other question was the property to the north. I assume that we had done a very quick layout just on how that could potentially be developed. In our meetings with Mr. and Mrs. Lloyd, who are the property owner of these 3 parcels, their house sits roughly right where my cursor is now. They've also got a shop in this area. Some of their concerns were not wanting to have to traverse through this existing subdivision to the east. So they were pretty committed or adamant to us getting this approach out to Ustick Road. And in order to do that, we had quite a few meetings with ACHD where we talked about alignment of this new approach here and a stub street here, so that if 11th, I think this is 11th here, ever were extended, it could be tied to this stub as well. And it's consolidating some potentially more access points on Ustick into one that is aligned with this subdivision to the south, creating a better scenario than what we have existing, like Alan mentioned. So in meeting with the folks to the north, their desire was that our stub street meet where their current driveway enters their property. Doing that allowed us to save their berm and landscaping and willow tree back in this corner. We also agreed that we would provide an additional easement on this lot. I believe it's lot 5 at that northwest corner for tree preservation. And we would hold our fence for this lot back further to preserve that tree and stay out of the tree canopy and the tree roots. We also agreed, as staff mentioned, to make these 4 lots single story. Another bit of the communication and coordination we had on this project was our proposal is to tile this private drain ditch along our east boundary. There's currently an existing chain link fence along the east top of slope of this ditch. Through working with the HOA management group in here and the developer or declarant of the CC&Rs over here, we were able to get agreement that we could remove that chain link fence, tile this ditch, and clean up the landscaping through here, making a much more seamless common area between the 2 subdivisions. There will be some tree removal, and I've met with the forester on site. He flagged up for us the trees that would require mitigation. So we're doing what we can to maintain as many of those trees as possible. I don't really have more other than I guess the main thing is just that I could answer any of your questions. Like I said, we're in agreement with all the recommended conditions of approval and ask for approval of our annexation zone and pre-plat.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Perot.
Thank you for this, this graphic. This is helpful. Regarding the property to the north, would they, if that were to develop, I saw the concept plan, it looks like it would just be 3 lots. Of course, that's just a concept plan. But would they then be, their only access would be through this property as well? Is that right?
Councilmember Pearl, that is correct. And I should mention, well, first of all, that layout was just a very quick conceptual, just to show how, you know, schematically a subdivision or a division of that property could occur within the city. They are remaining in the county. We do have on file with the title company a signed agreement by both us as well as Mr. and Mrs. Lloyd to the north that they agree with what we're proposing to do here and the vacation of that existing Llama Lane. And so, like I said, that agreement has been executed. I can't think of the official name. I think you have a copy, Alan, you should have. It's an agreement to terminate that Llama Lane private road easement or private drive access easement. So I meant to mention that earlier to answer one of your earlier questions as well. But yes, long way about, long answer, but yes, that is their access point. I think it's about 3.5 acres.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, should we have anybody sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, nobody signed up in advance of this hearing.
Okay. Last time I checked, we did have a few people in the attendees section of this. If there's anybody who would like to provide testimony on this item in the Zoom call, if you could do so by using the raise your hand feature, and we can bring you in to provide testimony. We have nobody here in the room in addition to Mr. Makwa, so we'll just give it a second. Seeing no one raise their hand, I don't know if the applicant would like to make any final comments or just open it up for questions in case council has anything more through their discussion. It looks like that's the direction we'll go. So council, I will turn this over to you for comments, questions, motions.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
just a comment as to the, excuse me, the roadway access stubbing off to the west, not connecting to the commercial. The letter that's been referenced, the January 14th letter from ACHD, I think does explain that pretty well as far as the reasoning behind the layout is as proposed and not having that connect through. So the applicant's comments and that remarks from ACHD and that email in the packet seem to support the current layout, at least as I see it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
And come on further on the connections. I appreciate the fact that they're planning ahead and connecting into 11th Street when that property just to the east develops and allows that to happen because another access is going to go away and it can create one single point instead of having multiple, which ACHD I think is looking for. And also it does have enough access points for other locations and pass through areas for people to get from one place to another. So I appreciate their diligence in working on that and working with the adjacent property owners and planning ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
if there isn't any more discussion, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion, a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Burnt.
are there any, before I make a motion, are there any, is there anything I need to add to the motion specifically, Alan?
Not unless you have anything that hasn't already been addressed in the staff report, sir. No.
Okay. With that said, after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2020-0112 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of February 9th, 2021.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton,
Aye.
Cavanagh,
He said aye.
Mr. Kavanagh, you are muted.
Sorry, I apologize.
I read his lips.
thank you. Perot,
Yay.
Hoagland,
Aye.
Burnt.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. With that, we will move on to public hearing for Mile High Pine Subdivision, H 2020-0099. We'll open this public hearing with staff comments, and I will turn this over to Mr. Dodson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening again. Might be bored of my voice, but I'm going to talk to you some more. So keep this chugging along. First item, as noted for me, is going to be Mile High Pines. It is a request for annexation of 17.46 acres of land with a request for CC and R15 zoning, a preliminary plat consisting of 5 building lots and 1 common lot, and a conditional use permit for a multifamily development consisting of a total of 135 residential units within the R15 district. The proposed land uses are multifamily residential in the form of detached cottages, townhomes, and vertically integrated structures. And so the land uses are multifamily and commercial, and they are consistent with the land use types noted in the mixed use community summary. Of the 135 residential units, 87 are the detached single-story cottages and 42 are the townhome units. There are also an additional 6 units within the 2 vertically integrated structures, 3 in each. The proposed product type is by definition multifamily, which is just more than 2 units on a single building lot. But the applicant has designed the units to emulate single-family attached and detached structures that share pedestrian pathways and open space rather than public streets. This, if you recognize it, this is the sister project to the Modern Crescent at Black Cat development that was approved fall last year. As shown, the project is approximately 8 dwelling units per acre, which meets the 6 to 15 dwelling unit per acre range for the mixed use community designation. The proposed residential area of the site incorporates mews, private streets, common open space, and different housing designs within the same parcel. Furthermore, the applicant is proposing 2-story townhomes along the southwestern boundary, along here, and on part of the eastern boundary along 10 Mile, with the rest of the site being a majority of single-story structures. Staff believes placing the commercial along 10 Mile offers an appropriate buffer between the busy arterial and the single-story structures that make up the center of the development. The applicant is also proposing a segment of multi-use pathway along the southern boundary as required with the master pathways plan. This segment will connect to the existing arterial sidewalk along 10 Mile and to a proposed micropath that traverses the entire western boundary of the site and connects to the detached sidewalk along Pine Avenue. In addition, the proposed sidewalks within the development are essentially micropaths and connect throughout the entire site. The applicant submitted conceptual elevations for the residential portion of the site, and overall they comply with the architectural standards manual. The applicant also submitted elevations showing additional color options for the detached structures in relation to a couple of my comments in my staff report. In addition, the applicant has provided conceptual commercial elevations, which also appear to show compliance with the architectural standards manual. Because this is a multifamily project and a commercial, both residential and commercial lots will be required to obtain administrative design review prior to building permit submittal. So these are just some of those designs. This applicant and the applicant for the proposed project to the north and west of this project have entered into a legally binding agreement that outlines the options for how Pine Avenue will be constructed. Pine Avenue extension will be constructed. In addition, ACHD has outlined different options for how this extension and road improvements can occur. At a minimum, the applicant will construct the intersection improvements as half of a 3-lane street section, one westbound receiving, eastbound left turn, and eastbound through and or right turn lane. In addition, the applicant is at a minimum required to extend and construct Pine Avenue outside of the area of influence of the intersection as half of a 36-foot wide street, 36-foot wide collector street, plus 12 additional feet of pavement to total 30 feet of pavement, and then also with 5-foot detached sidewalk. In addition, the applicant is required to enter into a signal agreement for the required signal improvements at the Pine and 10 Mile intersection. Staff appreciates the forethought of the agreement that the private property owners have come to sign and are legally bound to. Should help the extension and construction of Pine Avenue go a lot more smooth. Access is proposed via one private street access off of West Pine, shown here, and then one driveway access to 10 Mile. The 10 Mile access that is proposed as a full access. ACHD is requiring that the applicant construct a southbound right turn lane on 10 Mile Road for safer southbound access into the site. You kind of see the line work here, which was a revision following the commission meeting. The applicant is also proposing an emergency only access through one of the private drives to connect to a cul-de-sac in the adjacent subdivision that is scheduled to come before you in the future. No gates are proposed with this development to improve the integration and connectivity in line with the mixed use policies and goals. The private streets are proposed to be at least 25 feet wide with attached sidewalks of varying widths on both sides throughout the site. Both open and covered parking is proposed along the private streets. Staff had some concern with the street layout at the main entrance of the development off of Pine, where there is a three-way intersection. The applicant revised this intersection following the first commission meeting and is now shown as a more standard T intersection. Staff believes this design is a lot more efficient and safer, and we appreciate that the applicant decided to redesign that. Off-street parking is required in accord with the standards listed in the UDC for multifamily developments based on the number of bedrooms per unit. The latest parking plan shows a total of 429 spaces for the entire development, 320 for the residents, 8 reserved for the clubhouse, and 20 for the vertically integrated units, and then the remaining 81 are for the proposed commercial. The proposed parking does exceed the minimum UDC requirements. The proposed landscaping for the required street buffers and common open space meet UDC requirements as proposed. The proposed CC zoning district does require a 25-foot landscape buffer to any residential district. The submitted plans do not show compliance with this requirement because this is a mixed-use development. And there is the presence of landscaping, a sidewalk, and the street between the residential uses and commercial. Staff does not have particular concern over this discrepancy because of the mixed-use nature and integrated nature of the site. However, in order to comply with the UDC, the applicant does have to request a waiver from the city council to reduce this buffer to the buffer shown on these on the landscape plans. Based on the proposed plat of 16.4 acres, a minimum of 1.65 acres of qualified open space should be provided. In addition, common open space standards for multifamily developments also apply, so they should be combined. Combined, the required amount of minimum qualifying open space that should be provided is 2.56 acres. According to the open space exhibit, the applicant is proposing a total of 3.62 acres of qualified open space. Of that area, 2.47 is proposed to meet the overall minimum 10% requirement, the 11.3G requirements, that equates to approximately 15%. This qualified open space consists of the multi-use pathway segment, the required street buffers, and 2 large common open spaces, the central one and that adjacent to Pine Avenue. The remaining 1.15 acres is intended to meet the multifamily open space requirements. These areas of open space consist of the mews between the units and the attached products, areas of open space that meet the minimum 20 by 20 multifamily open space dimensions, and then 2 plazas that are shared between the commercial and residential portions of the site, here and here. Plazas also help with the mixed use policies and integration of the site. The proposed open space also exceeds the UDC requirements. In addition, the applicant is required to provide amenities. For the 11.3G requirements, 1 amenity should be provided, and the multi-use pathway satisfies that UDC requirement. The rest of the amenities are proposed to meet the specific use standards for multifamily development. A minimum of 4 amenities are required, but the decision body is authorized to consider additional for developments containing over 100 units, which is the case here. The following amenities are proposed with this application: a clubhouse with offices, a fitness facility, enclosed bike storage, a pool, a tot lot, 2 shared plazas, and pedestrian bicycle circulation plan or facilities. Therefore, the applicant is proposing 7 qualifying site amenities, which also exceed the UDC requirement. This application was heard by Planning and Zoning Commission twice, in December and earlier this year in January. The commission did move to recommend approval of the subject site following the second meeting. The main issues of discussion were the amount of commercial versus residential in both zoning and the square footage, and also the viability of staff's recommended conditions and layout changes, which I'll briefly go over here. The timeline of the Pine Avenue extension from 10 Mile to the existing section of Pine, the importance of the public work standards for the utility mains within private easements, and whether their plan can actually work. The Public Works Department did provide a memo before the second commission hearing offering their preliminary support. Again, Public Works does not review these in detail, or they cannot give a formal approval of the engineering plans because they are only conceptual engineering at this stage. The commission decided to change my staff report and revise all of my recommended conditions, or by striking them, except for the one regarding the T intersection, the three-way intersection near the north part of the site. I did note in my outline that there is an outstanding issue that they did not submit a parking plan, but that is incorrect. I missed that originally. So as I saw here, this was their submitted parking plan and I did not see that. So there are no more outstanding issues. The specific layout changes that I had proposed previously that commission did not follow through. I guess it's easier to show it here. I'll briefly go over them. I had proposed to remove the singular unit here to give this some open space. I proposed to replace the townhome units along 10 Mile with one of the vertically integrated buildings and parking. Recommended move 4 units that were behind the vertically integrated here that would have been here. Move those closer to the eastern north-south street and open up this area. And then recommended replacing all of the detached units along Pine with townhome units in order to help the transition between a busy collector street and the interior of the site. Those were my main issues. Commission and the applicant did not agree with many of them, again, except for the T intersection. So those did not get moved forward. No harm, no foul. Nothing personal, just didn't work out that way. One thing I will say that wasn't noted in the staff report is that when they did some revisions to the site to accommodate the intersection, they did actually find some extra room in the central area to widen some of the open space between the buildings so that the utilities can fit better. And Public Works has noted that as well, and they appreciate that. Following that, I do recommend approval of the subject applications, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Burr.
Hey, Joe, thanks a lot, bud. One quick question. Which conditions, again, did the applicant not agree to? Can you specify those one more time for me?
They have all been stricken from my staff report in the, or at least in the commission recs. I don't have that in front of me, but there were a number of them that were removed from the staff report. Let me see if I can find those for you really quick.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Barton.
I think they're on page 46.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
perhaps maybe why Council President Burns reviewing that. Joe, I do have a question. And this somehow, how I missed this. The emergency access that connects to this proposed cul-de-sac. Do we have an application that's coming before us that has a cul-de-sac located there? It just seems odd to me. I'm trying to track where that decision came from.
Councilman Cavanagh, yes, sir. There is an application that is in. I'm writing the staff report right now for the Planning and Zoning Commission. So they do have an active application that is moving forward, and there is a proposed cul-de-sac there. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, a follow-up.
Councilman Cavanagh.
And Joe, I'm having flashbacks to a hearing that we had maybe earlier in 2020 about cul-de-sacs and emergency access. So perhaps I'm being ultra sensitive to it. But when I like here on the site plan that's before us, it looks like there's some, trying to designate, okay, here's where a residential unit's going to be. And so my assumption is that the bulk of this cul-de-sac looks to me like open space. Is that your recollection?
Surrounding the cul-de-sac is what you're referring to, these kind of
Correct, yeah.
the recesses of my mind from earlier today. I would say that they are not open space. I think they are buildable lots.
Okay.
But again, that has not been moved forward yet.
Okay. I may want to come back at council and chat a little bit more about this later on tonight.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Deputy Chief.
Mayor and Councilmember Kavner, that emergency access is not required for this project. It's actually required for the other project, the one that Joe is talking about. So they are well aware of the requirement, and that's why the emergency access is there. So it's a bonus addition for us to be able to get to the backside of this development, but that emergency access is required for the other project. So if that helps any.
It doesn't, but I mean, it's good for us. It's good, I think, for both developments. I've got some hesitation about its location coming up to a cul-de-sac. So give me some time on that. Like I said, apologies. I missed that in the staff report or the discussion of planning and zoning.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Well, we got Joe Bongiorno queued up there, Chief. I just wanted to double check on the emergency access with just this development, because it sounds like the other one is a future development. And just wanted to make sure that you have all available access, because it looks like you can come in off of the Pine and the 10 Mile. And I guess you've gone over and can access everything either one way or the other. And everything is good. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, that is correct. And the other thing that we will also have is once Joe is finished with the project to the west, Pine, as part of that project in their first phase, is they're punching Pine all the way through. So we will actually be able to access it from Black Hat as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joe.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Joe.
All right, thank you. I didn't hit on that enough, I guess. I just wanted to reiterate that this applicant, as well as the applicant for the future or proposed project to the west and north, are working very closely. They already have the binding agreement to extend Pine, but then, like Chief Bongiorno said, this applicant is being nice enough to offer that emergency access to their property as well. So, and I didn't mention the connection along the north here. This is going to be a public road on the other property, but it will be a private street connection to there to help with that integration between uses and between the residential in this property and the commercial of this one. So I didn't iterate that they are working together very heavily. I didn't hit that point enough, so I just wanted to reiterate that.
And Joe, just to follow up, is the reason why there's not being recommended a regular access because it's onto a private street and only emergency access at that cul-de-sac?
Mr. Mayor, that's a loaded question. With some of the history that has been discussed with this, how do I answer that? This applicant doesn't want cut through traffic as much as possible. The discussions that I've had is they're afraid that if that were a public access, they would just go through this site in order to get out to 10 Mile rather than going up to Pine. So that was the major concern by the applicant. But that has been discussed multiple times of having a public road connection through the site.
I might have known it was loaded, so.
Thank you, sir.
But I think it's worth part of the conversation for this consideration.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
So, Joe, you were talking about conversations about ratios of residential to commercial and whatnot. And I was just pulling up the cut sheets for MUC. I was trying to remind myself uses in that. So it's my understanding this property to the west is also zoned, or future land use is designated as MUC. So I know we don't have, I know we don't have a hearing yet on this property to the west, but what would be the ideal ratio of residential to commercial for both of the properties together, the subject property here and the property to the west? Is this primarily intention for that whole property to the west to also be residential? It seems to me that would be that would not be exactly what MUC has in mind.
Councilwoman Perot, great question. With the cut sheets, unfortunately, there aren't more empirical numbers when it comes to the ratios. There is a minimum amount of residential that's proposed, which I believe is 20%. We don't have minimums for commercial, which is staff. Frankly, I wish we did. It would make some of these easier in that way. But nonetheless, all of these projects are very fluid. This whole property is mixed use community, whereas the one to the west has both medium density residential and mixed use community. And as has been noted before, the future land use designations are not parcel specific. They can be floated. They can be, massaged a little bit. So for this project, I think it's adequate, especially with the commercial that's going to be in the vertically integrated, and that is adjacent to the residential. And this percentage-wise is better than the previous renderings for the Modern Craftsman at Black Cat, which is their sister project. The ratio is better on this site. The applicants found that being on 10 Mile and closer to the freeway was going to offer them better opportunities for the commercial, as well as the commercial that already exists east across 10 Mile. So in this case, I think that it is good. I don't want to get into any details with the one to the west because we haven't yet heard that or seen that. So
follow up. Mr. Mayor.
Was that, sorry, someone?
Yes. Can I?
Okay, you look frozen. Yes, Councilwoman Pro.
Thank you. So Joe, was there any conversation with the commission? And I apologize, I didn't get to go through everything that they deliberated on, but was there any conversation there about having more commercial use in this? Did they discuss that and make a recommendation to that? Personally, I think that there could be more commercial in here. I'd like to actually see the commercial run all the way down the east side of this myself. Was there a conversation about that? And then also to follow up with Councilman Hoagland's question, if those two lots there directly to the west off the cul-de-sac are buildable lots, I mean, it seems like that's a pretty heavy transition there. So if you would comment on that as well.
absolutely. Thank you, Councilwoman Perot. The commission did not discuss the amount of commercial in this in the sense of increasing it. They did actually not discuss that in very much detail. I believe the discussion was more about the leasable square footage and the fact that there's 3 buildings here and not just one like on the previous project. In addition, the vertically integrated that has, I believe, roughly 2,500 square feet of each one of them of commercial space. So I know the applicant's going to talk about the offices that are inside the clubhouse that are also for rent for within the subdivision, those types of things. But your comments are taken very seriously. I understand this, especially in the mixed use community and especially along 10 Mile. Understood. And then when it comes to the homes or the transition, that question was asked at commission as well. And I can see your point there completely. There's a lot of units abutting the single lots, but because they are facing perpendicular, we determined that was, with the pathway and the open space there, and then the buffers that are going to be, the homes aren't going to be directly adjacent to that there was adequate space between those single family homes and then these townhome units, especially because they're only 2 stories, they're not 3-story units, which is obviously a benefit as well.
Council, any further questions for staff at this time? Okay, then we will go ahead and ask the applicant to please come forward. I'll turn this over to Deb Nelson for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to share my screen here if that's all right. And my name's Deborah Nelson. My address is 601 West Bannock Street in Boise. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Barron Properties. I've also got members of the development team and Barron Properties with me, and they're all available to answer your questions. And wanted to say thank you to Joe. We've been working with staff for more than a year on this project to come up with a site plan that everybody supported. And then, yes, there were a couple of issues that came up right before the commission. We worked through those successfully with Joe and the commission. And then we are able to say that we are in full support of the entire recommendation and every condition of approval coming out of the commission. We're also in support of every agency comment that has been provided and all of the recommended conditions of approval. And there has been no public opposition. So we feel like we're bringing to you a very well-developed site plan. I'd like to walk through that and some of our product, but also address some of the questions that you've begun to raise this evening. Starting with the vicinity, I want to point out a couple of features. Obviously, Joe noted the Pine Street extension that this project, along with the development to the west, is going to provide that much needed connectivity over to Black Cat Road. Also, we've got quite a bit of mixed use and commercial development around us. Immediately across the street, there's a bank and a gas station and office uses. We've got just to our south, the 10-mile specific area plan area that is quickly developing, as you know well. The gateway at 10 Mile has high density residential, mixed use office and retail planned there. You've also got developments just south of that with a similar mix. You've got great employers here with FedEx and Amazon. And, you know, Barron Properties is really interested in this site because this 16-acre site, like the project that you approved up at Black Cat and Chinden, is a great location to provide housing that's in demand with folks in Meridian that can work at these employers that are just down the street at FedEx and Amazon. Also, these young forming households, retiring baby boomers that are looking for a turnkey lifestyle, professionals, teachers, nurses. And so it's great housing for to serve your residents. It's the additional commercial that will be added will complement the commercial and existing uses around us as well. The site plan, this shows the split between the zones. And as Joe walked through, this is consistent with the designation of the MUC in your comprehensive plan. We've got a mix of uses and both vertical and horizontal integration between the residential and the non-residential uses. With the two vertically integrated buildings, we will have 10,800 square feet of commercial, 5,400 in each. These uses will support a variety of commercial interests to support our community and others with pedestrian connectivity to them, and such as a coffee shop or a yoga studio. The commercial business area along 10 Mile, and that wraps the corner up and up to the Pine access on the north side, will accommodate approximately 17,800 square feet of commercial and mixed uses with possible uses of restaurants, retail, office, medical office, daycare, again, serving a larger area than just our neighborhood. Our centrally located clubhouse includes over 500 feet of work from home office space and private offices for the residents' use, as well as community meeting space. The 135 residents are in a variety of detached and attached building types, which enables this for rent community to live, feel, and appear like a neighborhood rather than an apartment complex. The residences are connected to the clubhouse amenities and to this commercial through landscaped and hardscaped pathways and decorative crosswalks, really achieving that integration that's called for in your comprehensive plan. Turning to some of the architecture, these are the attractive entry monuments on Pine. Our clubhouse. And inside the clubhouse, residents can enjoy those workspaces I mentioned, a coffee bar, indoor gathering and seating areas, a kitchen and fitness area. Outside the clubhouse is a community pool with a large deck, covered gazebos and grill areas. The vertical integration buildings that have been mentioned, these provide that commercial space on the ground floor and 6 residential units on the second floor with studio and 1-bedroom units. This is really a unique product type that we introduced at Black Cat at staff suggestion has been integrated again here. And we're excited to provide that vertical integration in your MUC areas. Some other colors and orientations. The residential in the R15 portion, this is going to include a mix of housing. There's 1, 2, and 3 bedroom offerings in detached homes, duplexes, and sixplexes, some with attached or tuck under garages. This slide shows a 1-bedroom duplex with different roof lines. All of the residential units will provide private outdoor space, most with private backyards. The residential units include modern finishes with stainless steel appliances, in-unit washers and dryers, great living spaces with open floor plans and 9 to 12 foot ceilings. All of the buildings use quality materials, including stone and stucco and wood tone siding. The roof lines provide variety with some single slope and some hip roofs. You can see both illustrated here. We have 4 color palettes to provide variety, but also cohesiveness and complementary color schemes. To show a few more of the products, we've got 2 types of the 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Here's the second. Here's the 3-bedroom and 2-bath. And here's the 6-plex townhomes with the tuck under garages and a front and a back view. Multiple color palettes on these as well. The 6-plexes have 4 2-bedroom units on the interior and 2 3-bedroom units on each end. This slide really helps to illustrate the unit type variety, the different products, roof lines, colors, create this distinctive community that lives and feels like a neighborhood. Now, most of the residential development is single story with the duplexes detached and 2 and 3 bedroom units intermixed. And each of the 2 and 3 bedroom units will come in the variety of these layouts with the different roof types that are illustrated here. Showing the roof line, the color palette variety, and here's a close-up of those color palettes. During the Planning and Zoning Commission's review, they actually did ask for this 4th color palette that was added. So now between the 2 roof lines, the 3 facade finishes, and these 4 color palettes, each one of our unit types, whether that's a 1-bedroom, one of the 2-bedroom styles, or the 3-bedroom, has 24 different variations. So there's going to be a lot of distinctiveness from unit to unit and visual interest throughout the neighborhood. Joe already walked through our parking. I just want to emphasize that we're well overparked, which is great, especially when you've got the commercial uses. We want to make sure have all the parking they need. We've got 429 spaces, we're only 294 required. Quite a bit of covered spaces and garage enclosed and tuck under spaces. We have storage that's available through our self-storage lockers and bike parking spaces. The project is designed with a more open space that's required too, as Joe already walked through. And there's really a great connectivity, especially east-west, to connect to our new western development that's happening to our border so that they can also walk through and get to the commercial areas. In addition to all of the public open space, common area open space, we have private open space with an average of almost 400 square feet per residence. I would also note that Fuller Park is not far to the north. The project amenities, Joe walked through those and emphasized that we've got more than is required. And really, again, trying to integrate them centrally and provide some community connections between our commercial and our residential areas. That connectivity is really shown here through these pathways. You can see the significant east-west pathway through the middle, the multi-use pathway along the southern border, And the pathways create a loop, a walking loop, as well as connections to all of the focal points with amenities and the commercial. All of our service providers have provided positive comments, so we don't have any concerns. We're within all of the appropriate response times. We have capacity in all of the schools that our children would be attending. There's limited impact on schools from this development. Based on West Data's calculation, there would be 14 students from our development. We are seeking, as Joe mentioned, a waiver between the zones. Your code does require a waiver really when it's expected that you're adding a commercial zone or development next to a property that someone else owns and operates. And so they want you to create that buffer area. But as we discussed in Black Cat and this council agreed, that does not really make sense where you've got a single owner and operator. We'll be owning and operating these vertically integrated buildings and clubhouse that are immediately adjacent to the residential uses. And so that separation is not required. There is in fact physical separation there between the buildings that's approximately 25 feet. So it is met, but we just don't want to create an artificial boundary within the development when they're really intended to operate together. We want to keep that integration, keep those pathways close, and keep everything flowing and connected. We have provided the commercial concepts, as Joe mentioned. And, you know, I guess I want to just address a few of the comments we heard about the commercial. Councilmember Perot, you asked specifically about, you know, extending the commercial all the way down 10 Mile. We explored that layout when we were meeting with staff initially at the very outset, and actually they encouraged us to instead wrap it up around Pine and take it further west. And so that's why it now is further, our vertically integrated brings that across Pine to be west of it. And you can see, if you really look at that CC area, it's sort of a circle. You can see all the buildings kind of face each other, creating the open plazas and connectivity in between, rather than having a line of commercial down 10 Mile that felt separated. The idea that staff really wanted us to achieve was this integration. And the Planning and Zoning Commission really liked that as well. They liked the arrangement. And so when there were some comments at the last minute before the Planning and Zoning Commission, Joe mentioned he had some other conditions we didn't accept. He had been suggesting to rearrange a few things, and as we understood it from Joe, he was concerned that there was some question from Public Works about whether our utilities would fit as planned, and so he'd suggest some rearranging. We were able to work through everything we needed with Public Works, and substantively, we preferred the layout we had been working on with staff for months to keep this layout, keep the vertically integrated where it is, keep the townhomes where they are, and not flip them, because we like the integration here, and Planning and Zoning Commission agreed. They also, as Joe mentioned, did not have any concerns with the amount of commercial. They thought it was sufficient, and they liked the mix. They liked the rooftop supporting the commercial. They liked the integration. They liked the way that we have everything flowing together from east-west to connect to other properties as well. And so they did not have additional concerns. In fact, they really liked the layout. At the end of the day, they approved this with conditions that, as Joe mentioned, the only thing we rearranged that they wanted was the intersection, which was fine. And then we're in complete agreement. So with that, I'd like to share a fly through if I can quickly. I will see if this works, just to show you the overall development together, and then close. With that, I think I'm out of time and I'll just answer any questions you have.
Yeah, we lost you in the very last comments.
Can you hear me now, Mayor?
Yep.
I think I'm out of time, but I would stand for any questions that the council has.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deb, appreciate the presentation and the work you and your team have put into this. I know you guys have been working on this project for a long time. Just a couple of clarifying questions for me. As you know, we always are concerned about impacts on the schools, and clearly, as proposed, this doesn't seem like it's got an impact on the neighboring schools. I also know that probably in the time you've been working this project, West Data has put together a proposal to redraw some boundary lines and move kids from one part of town over to some of those schools that impact your project. I'm just curious how recent those numbers are and if they're based on current enrollment or projected future enrollment.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Cavanagh, my understanding is.
We're having a hard time.
Can you hear me better now?
Try again.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Great.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why the microphone's not picking up well. Councilmember Cavanagh, those numbers should be very current. Now, I do understand that West Data is looking to redistrict and pull our elementary. We understand our elementary kids, although they were previously slotted for Peregrine, will now be attending the Chaparral, which is great because that's right across the street. And it has more capacity is what we've been told. And so our understanding from West Data is that if anything, the capacity is getting better.
Perfect. Mr. Mayor, an additional question, if I may.
Councilman Cavanagh.
So, Deb, I really like this project for a lot of reasons. I think it's really, really creative. I like the live work. I think you guys have been really thoughtful in how you're laying things out. My one hiccup, and I even hate to call it that, is the roof lines on your sixplex. And you see it play out in that video that you showed. It create this these giant ramps on the roof lines, and it reminds me a lot of what we see over there on Eagle between Fairview and Ustick behind the Commercial Tire and the Jimmy John's. You've got this kind of sea of the same style of roof line, and because you guys have been so thoughtful in kind of the architectural design, I guess I don't know if there were any conversations about that internally, if staff had brought up any thoughts about that. To me, I think it is such a little thing, but to me, it's kind of like the cherry on top to really make this project really stand out and be unique. And so I just give you an opportunity to respond if you had any thoughts or questions.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Cavanagh, that has not come up. We've gotten a lot of compliments for the architecture, particularly the commission seems to really like the style and look of it. So I have not heard that particular comment. But certainly as we, focus in on the final layout, I mean, it's a good comment that we'll certainly take into account and try to address that to see if in the arrangement that we can try to avoid your concern. So I appreciate the feedback. But I hadn't heard it yet.
I think you guys have done a good job of differentiating the kind of the architectural styles that I think that shift when it comes to roof lines would really make it stand out. So I've got some other questions about the private roads, but I think that's best addressed with staff. Really appreciate you bringing this project and your diligence throughout.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd be happy to address any questions about roads as well.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Cavanagh, keep going. Get your questions answered.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Deb, what conversations have you and your team had about these private roads? I guess my questions are kind of twofold. One, if this development's going to be, a single owner, is the plan then that, as the roads deteriorate, if the maintenance will be handled by a single entity, or if that falls onto a condo association or a neighborhood association of some sort. And then my other question is just about the connectivity. Again, I don't have an issue typically with private roads. I get a little worried when they start connecting with other neighborhoods and other developments. about the ability to block that intended access in the future. And I'm just curious what provisions you guys have explored to prevent that from happening in the future.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Cavanagh, so thank you for that question.
Your mic's not picking up again, Deb.
Let's see if I can rearrange my laptop. Does that help?
Great.
Okay, thank you. Please do tell me if you can't hear me. We have explored had a lot of discussions with both ACHD and the staff about the roads within the development. They will be all maintained by the operator, which is the owner and developer. They are going to continue. So it'll be Barron Properties that is continuing to own and operate this, and they will maintain all of the roads within the development. It is common, of course, and appropriate within a multifamily development that you would have private drive aisles, but they have also really worked hard with staff to create, despite the fact that you would normally just have private lanes within a development like this, to create that additional connectivity. And so initially we did that by proposing gates to allow the emergency access up in that northwest corner, but staff asked us to remove those. So we have accommodated that. We are worried about, drive cut through and dangerous road conditions. ACHD does not support that northern driveway being a public street at all. So they don't support that. They want the trips from the development to the west to go up to Pine and out to the light. And we hope that most of them will. That's where we'd like them to go too, so that they're not driving through our development and creating any safety concerns. But the connectivity does exist, and so they can. There is an opportunity if they want to come and drive through to get to the commercial. We hope they'll walk through, but so the connectivity exists, the functionality exists, but truly it's so close to Pine. We hope that people are going up to Pine to access the signal that way.
So Deb, I'm going to piggyback off that question just a little bit, or your comments, because it's, I guess, help me understand safety. You say safety for cut through. My subdivision has neighboring subdivisions that are connected and cars drive by all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What is the challenge? Is it that the roads are not wide enough to allow other traffic through? What is or you just they don't want it to drive through?
Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. Yes, it is. It's a lot to do with the size of the roads and the facilities there. And actually our engineer is probably the best person to answer that question. So I'm going to let Dave Bailey address that.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Hoagland, my name is David Bailey. I'm with Bailey Engineering. My office address is 1119 East State Street in Eagle. The drive lanes within this project are actually just like apartment drive lanes. They have parking that backs into them, and they're the place that that our tenants move around in. And so they would be exactly like you would have in any apartment complex from that direction. So the reason for naming them and actually calling them private streets is twofold. One is so that we can have the appropriate sewer and water easements within those streets that so the city can maintain their facilities. And secondly, because the fire department wants to have those private streets named so that they can address the buildings in a more organized manner. Otherwise, we'd be addressing these buildings throughout the site off of Pine or off of 10 Mile through that direction. So they're not intended to actually function as private streets from the direction that, say, your subdivision, whether it has public or private streets, has traffic and connectivity. We certainly want to have connectivity, pedestrian primarily, and secondarily, the vehicular, just a way to go, to get there. But for the size of this project and the project next door, the intent is certainly for all traffic to go to a collector street and then go from there to arterials. So people traveling to the commercial within this project from the project to the west could come through this way, but we don't see that as it's not a travel route. It's a way for people within the apartment to get to within this complex to get to their apartments. And the traffic, functions just fine from that perspective. So hope that answers that a little better.
It's an answer. I will give you that.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Pro.
So I've lived in this area for a number of years, very familiar with this whole quadrant, and just a couple of things that I wanted to share. Maybe you can shed some light on. You mentioned that you hope that people will walk to those commercial areas. I assume you mean from within the development, because in my opinion, this area is not pedestrian friendly in any way, shape, or form, nor is it friendly for bicyclists. So if you have someone that's renting in your community and they work down in that 10-mile interchange area, that's not, in my opinion, a pedestrian or bicycle friendly area. So just curious your thoughts around that. And that's not specific to your development, other than it sounds like you are hoping that there'll be a pedestrian element to it, or you're trying to encourage that. And then the second thing I wanted to say is, this is more of a comment, but I always love the video renderings, for lack of a better term. I don't know exactly what you call them. But one thing I noticed about this one, and maybe it's just the coloring that's used in it, is all I saw was blacktop. Like, I'm going through there and all I see is is just asphalt everywhere. And that was the thing that struck me so significantly. And so we already discussed this quite a bit here, and that is, we know that Meridian is suburban, and that we've struggled to become more urban in a lot of ways, but it's necessary that we do. And so I see this as a really suburban feel, and that's not necessarily a comment that you need to, that I'm saying that needs to be changed. I just, it's, this whole area has a lot of rentals, a lot of apartment complexes. I know that was designed on purpose by the 10-mile area specific plan, for there to be a lot of opportunity for folks to live in this area and work in this area. I would have loved to, I know the concept that your company does, I would have loved to actually seen these be owned instead of rented. That's not the concept that's here. So I just, I have concerns about this whole area 20 years in the future, that we will be out of ratio for homes that are owned versus homes that are rented. But also, and I know it's allowed, so this is not, again, this is just something I'm kind of throwing out there, but the commercial, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because it really links into the commercial, in the sense of, we've had a lot of conversations as a city about our ratio of commercial to residential, and it's not a ratio that I'm satisfied with. Personally, as a council member, I would like to see us have more commercial. I know commercial is a general term for a whole lot of different uses, but we already have a lot of multifamily in this location. So I know we're here. I know you've already done your plan. You're not likely to change your plan because of my desire per se, but I really would have liked to have seen actually some additional commercial use, because we need that in our city, in my opinion. So before we close the public hearing, I want to give you a chance to respond to those comments.
Thank you very much. Mayor, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Perot, thanks for the questions and comments, and I'll try to answer and then just provide some responsive comments as well. Yes, I was talking about pedestrian access to our commercial, and I think that's one of the great things of what this development is offering, is all of these pathways that lead to a neighborhood commercial feel. Plus, there is a little more draw of a regional commercial with the corner opportunity. I mean, the site does still have, somewhat constrained access, but there could be some drive-through opportunities at the corner for folks going off to work, where we would love to have an active commercial corner there. And so there certainly is enough space for it. I mean, but with our vertical integration and what we've laid out just in concept of that commercial, we're over 28,000 square feet of commercial for only a 16-acre site. So that's actually quite a bit. And it's because of the willingness of the developer to really work on that vertically integrated project, to pull that commercial into the site, and to really find ways to even have these smaller commercial uses that are a little more likely to site there right away. So we do hope that there will be additional connectivity and use between our rooftops that support the whole 10-mile specific area plan, to help that connectivity that you say is missing. We are improving our frontage. Hopefully all these new detached sidewalks will help people walk down there. It certainly is a very short walk if you work at the Amazon facility or FedEx to get there from our development. And so we hope that actually will support this. And this slightly denser development style is what's needed to support both connectivity from a pedestrian standpoint and commercial, which I hear you is a very important aspect of this. So we hope we're actually helping to further the vision that you have for this area with this project by doing that. So I think one more comment, I think maybe the aspect of the fly through just being kind of high, it looks like, and we were actually trying to show, we went down the streets to show the feel as if you were between them. And I do think it overemphasized the streets, perhaps, as you noted. It was a trying to give you the feel of it inside of it. But truly, if you think about the fact of our prior discussion about how narrow these driveways are, it's not all asphalt. We have asphalt as needed to serve the commercial, but we've really broken it up with those two plazas that are in between that have the decorative pathways that connect right across the parking lots and the streets. So it really does, I think, pull it in and break it up maybe more than that was evident from that.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Clerk, I see we have nobody in the audience and no one online. I assume we had no one signed up to testify.
Mr. Mayor, we did not.
Okay, I will still throw it out there in case there's anybody in the room who would like to testify or make comments. You can use the raise your hand feature. And seeing no one, I'll turn this over to the applicant for any final comments.
Well, thank you, Mayor and council members, for your consideration of this and for your thoughtful review and comments. We appreciate your insights on it. It has been a long collaborative process for more than a year of working with staff and through the commission with 2 hearings. And we feel very proud of what we're bringing to you tonight. I hope that you can see it will be a nice addition to your city to offer the opportunities of the vertical and horizontal mixed use integration and this in-demand housing type that can serve so many of your residents. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Deb, I'll ask you one question about the commercial. And I guess one of my concerns might be that this is so successful and so popular that this area becomes, in the commercial in particular, becomes really crowded. And maybe an unfair comparison that leads to the question is the, I think it's Locust Grove and Chinden, totally different development, but you've got where the, I'm drawing a blank on Homestead and a bunch of popular commercial adjacent to residential, and it's the parking there is a disaster. And I wonder, as I look at what you're proposing, perhaps there's fewer commercial pads than what's over at that example. But is there any concern that even though it might be technically adequately parked, that if you throw some establishments, it might become extremely popular and create that type of problem that they've got over there with parking?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, we can only hope to have a wildly successful commercial development. But as for the parking concerns, we should have ample parking. We have 429 parking spaces on site, where only 324 are required under your code to meet our residences, our clubhouse, the vertically integrated, and the commercial. So I think we've got that flexibility already built into the site plan with those counts to accommodate in any, if there's a restaurant that's particularly successful, that would be nice.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, just a comment on the question. I appreciate that. And one of the things I think you've done really well is encourage that pedestrian connectivity for these diverse housing opportunities and the residents there, encouraging them to walk or bike to these establishments and leave their car behind. So I think that's really well done.
Council, I'll just take a second to at least save my piece. I think we've heard a lot about council's concerns over shared driveways in projects recently. So I won't try to be a broken record, but it is a little concerning to me to have a project this size that does not really have what I would consider cross access to neighboring properties. When you look at the last public hearing we talked about cross access and how it interacts with adjacent residential. No idea what's being planned for that side, but I go back to Dashwood, I go back to a lot of other conversations. And when we limit cross access, even with an emergency access, heck, let's go talk about the stuff we heard last week. Emergency access, cross access, it creates more challenges than generally if we up front created real cross access and accommodated that. That's just a general comment. I don't know if a multifamily gets a pass from needing to have cross access because it's all supposed to be self-contained and not connected to others. I don't know the answer to that, but I think from a general standpoint, for me, looking at things when you don't allow for vehicle cross access, it creates challenges or problems and things I think that we should generally take another look at and how we apply them. So food for thought, whether it's for today or for the future.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Kavanagh.
appreciate waxing poetic on that, but I'm also curious, do you have a suggestion for an improvement to this particular application that you would like to see implemented to address that concern of yours?
Yes and no. I would make a full public street access connected through the south up through the project. But that would require significant modifications to this project in ways that can't sit here and tell you here's the way it would work or how it would best be implemented. But I would make that a full public street through there and modify the entire development to allow for that to occur. If I was going to be very serious about a recommendation.
Okay.
I have no idea what the impacts of that would be to the design, the layout. And I agree it's a very attractive project, a lot of great mix components, but it does feel like it's its own little island. And I don't know if own little islands are what we support and advocate for from development. That's what it feels like to me. I've been trying to really think about other multifamily developments around the valley and if that's the approach that makes sense as compared to not. So again, it's a general comment as much as it is something else.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Burt.
I think this is an interesting project. I think it looks nice. My only concern is I would have liked to have seen more commercial along 10 Mile. We have one shot at commercial. And I agree with Deb, 28,000 square feet is not a small amount. That's just what I'm thinking right now.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Just to go back to your comments, and I think they're a good point that you make. I think we have to look at it though as on a site-by-site basis. The location of this being at the corner of Pine and 10 Mile, I think if we put something further to the south would be a right in, right out only. And where this is located so close to the, I call it the half-mile mark, and you're going to have a light at Pine, ACHD and other developments should be going to that light and not coming up from other locations. And again, it'd be a limited, I think, right in, right out. Otherwise, it's with that light that close, it makes sense for this site. But to your overall point, I do think we ought to take a look at developments as they occur and where they occur and how those things are put together and what type of easements or accesses are there for the for that situation. So it's just one of those where for this, I do think it's well designed. Yeah, you'd like to see more commercial. I appreciate the commission going through this. Planning and Zoning Commission had 2 meetings on this and really worked through a lot of the issues and worked very hard along with staff to put together and kudos to the applicant for working with them and making some changes and putting together a site that I think is good for this particular location. Other comments notwithstanding, that can we always look for improvements? Probably, but it's well done. So I think this is something that we can move forward with.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Joe.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to comment on that a little bit. I guess to put it bluntly, a lot of the concerns that have come up are things that staff has relayed to the applicant from the beginning. I might get thrown under the bus for that, but that is something that has come up, especially the public road access that I did mention and that you had asked about, Mr. Mayor. When that was brought up, that was vehemently told no and not a big discussion point. And I understand their reasonings to some degree. I do know one of them would be where that could connect if it were to connect to 10 Mile or to Pine. That location is going to be largely dictated by ACHD, and I don't know where that would be because that has never been presented to ACHD from my understanding. But I just wanted to reiterate that staff does understand where the council is coming from, and a lot of these concerns were brought up in pre-app meetings and other non-official pre-app meetings.
Mayor.
Thank you, Joe. Councilman Pro.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing that. I always appreciate the staff's perspective on those things because when we get these packets, it's just frequently a huge amount to go through, and sometimes it is nice to just hear it instead of trying to read through dozens of pages of it. So I wanted to comment on what you shared, Mayor. I think for me, it's not so much the element. I mean, it is the private streets, but because we see that a lot in apartment complexes, right? We see just like Mr. Bailey mentioned, it's the integration of the private apartment complex type idea with the commercial, which is what you don't see frequently happen. And so it's not as much the fact that it's isolated and there isn't cross access wouldn't, in my opinion, be as much of a challenge if this was just a residential piece. But when you tie the residential piece in with the commercial and then you don't have cross access, that's where the issue comes in. That's just my opinion. So if the residential piece was separated from the commercial, then that might be a different conversation. On a corner, I wouldn't love it to have if this commercial were isolated from the residential on a corner, I don't think that would make sense. But if I understood you correctly, I believe you suggested that there be a public street that comes up from the south and exits and goes all the way up to Pine, or are you suggesting that it exit out onto 10 Mile there to the east?
All I would be suggesting is that where it currently is connecting through that, the emergency access, that somehow be a public street that connects, it could connect back out to where the current exit is. Again, it would likely require a redesign for a lot of reasons. You can't make those corners. There's all those. I get it. I understand it. I like the project. I just do ask the question, we create a lot of winners and losers when we talk about connectivity in these situations. And, I go back to some of the most contentious conversations that I've seen before council over the last 3 years have been, where connections are going to occur and where they're not going to occur. And when we create a situation where we have two projects coming in, maybe roughly at the same time, and we basically show a connection, but we don't want to make a connection, I have to ask the question of why. What is the value to whom and why? What is appropriate, what is not appropriate? And this is one where we don't have the benefit of the other application, so we don't know exactly what it's going to look like and why it should or shouldn't connect. But that becomes my question when I look at this. We seem like we want a connection, but we really don't. Why?
Mr. Mayor, would it be appropriate to provide any responsive comments on this topic? May I respond?
Council wants it, sure.
I just briefly to make sure you have the full benefit of what we are trying to balance here, and a lot of discussions with staff and with the commission about this. We're trying to balance that we want this to be a pedestrian friendly neighborhood, and so we've got all these pathways and crosswalks where we've got everyone walking, including potentially children, to the amenities and enjoying the play areas and enjoying the pool. So we want to balance their safety and pedestrian access. At the same time, it's exactly as you pointed out, Councilmember Perot, because of the commercial is why staff asked us to open up that northwest corner, and we did. And so there is that opportunity, but truly the expectation from, and what ACHD has asked for, is that our users, the neighbors to the west, and really everyone down Pine Street, because this is all going to be open now, use Pine as that collector to get out to the intersection and including to our commercial that way. So those were the things we were trying to balance. And so we do have it open. It does provide cross access, but it's not intended to be the collector that Pine is.
Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Chief.
I do have the plat available for the Foxcross sub, which is the sub to the west, if you would like to see it.
I would not. I don't want to confuse the conversation
Okay.
more than it does. I think we saw a little bit in the flyover of what the road configuration next door likely looks like. At least I noticed that. But thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pro.
I would just like to comment. It seems like our applications this evening, and frequently we have conversations about what's happening surrounding the subject properties that we're considering, and not, in addition to the property itself. And as elected officials making decisions on behalf of an entire city, we have to take those into account, no matter how fantastic a project might be. And so just wanted to say it's never, I understand how it can appear to be a reflection of the application before us, but truly it's that we are obligated to have this bigger picture decision making as we consider each of these. And so it's not to be, I just want to kind of put this out there, that it's not because we are making a decision about the subject application based on the neighboring property, but that we have to take that into account as we look to plan the city as a whole. And so I wanted to say that because it's frequently a frustration of applicants. Now, you do this for a living, so it may or may not be yours, but it's frequently a frustration. And unfortunately, sometimes there are effects on the decisions that we make because of what happens in the surrounding area. And that's just what we have to do. So maybe it wasn't necessary to say that, but sometimes I feel an obligation to put that out there if we have members of the public who are listening and trying to understand how, you know, all the different variables that we take into consideration.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I appreciate the discussion. I'll just give you a snapshot of where I'm at if we're deliberating a titch before closing the public hearing. Just starting with the comp plan and the future land use map. I mean, it's mixed use community. It hits exactly what's intended there. And with the CC and the R15, hits what's intended in that description of the comp plan. In this circumstance, and Councilman Hoagland mentioned it and referenced it well, I think in this circumstance, the directive of traffic to Pine and a 10-mile is appropriate. I thought the way it's laid out and not connecting with the public street to the west made sense in this circumstance. And Deb referenced the pedestrian connectivity and the desire to have this try to be self-contained and encourage folks to be able to easily walk to the amenities or walk to the commercial for a cup of coffee or a restaurant or go to the bank. I think all of that is encouraged by this design, and it's something that we like to see. The parking, it's more than adequately parked. I think the answer on the parking concern was spot on. The open space and the amenities, I think, are really nice for this. And we talk often about diverse housing options, not only in the design, but in the opportunities for residents to have options. And this clearly provides a lot of that. I think the design is really creative. And the connectivity, which I referenced earlier. So I'm just looking through my notes. I think it's a great project. I really do. I don't think it needs to be redesigned. I think it's going to be extremely popular, and it puts traffic where it should. Utilizes Pine and 10-mile well. I think the waiver that's requested for the buffer, seeing that it's kind of a self-contained project between the CC and the R15 is appropriate in this particular circumstance. We're not abutting commercial next to some different project that's not related to it. So in this circumstance, that waiver seems to be appropriate. So I'm supportive of it, ready to move forward as designed with all of the conditions within the staff report, including that waiver of the reduced buffer between the two zones.
Council, any additional comments, motions, questions?
Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
if we don't have any further comments or questions, I would move that we close the public hearing on H 2020-0099.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the good discussion on this project and also on issues that we have to consider in future projects. We have a big responsibility here. Our community is growing rapidly. There are things that, and it will continue to grow. And we just have a lot to consider when these things come before us. And sometimes we can impact them and direct them in a way that makes improvements. And there's other times where there are things there that we just have to do the best we can with what we can do within the constraints of the law. So as been mentioned, this is a thoughtful project. A lot of work and effort has gone into it to make it a very good project. I know I saw some statistics today I was reading about the for rent and why it's so popular. And because of wages versus what was needed for a down payment from a conference that was held about housing in the Treasure Valley. And this is why these things are coming forward, because there is a great demand for it. And the better quality it is, that's fantastic. And understand why they're doing some of the things they're doing. And I think going forward that we just have to continue discussing and debating the issues for each development as it comes before us for those important items that we talked about tonight. So I'm ready to make a motion unless other folks have a comment. Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve H 2020-0099 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of February 9th, 2021. And with a modification that with the waiver to reduce the buffer to what is shown on the submitted landscape plans.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
it was brought up a moment ago, at least during the discussion, and I just think it's important to reiterate that part of the process that was done really well here is our planning staff pressing particular issues that they thought, Joe, you did a good job in raising concerns, not code compliance necessarily, but thoughtful planning considerations. We really appreciate it when you and our entire planning staff brings those things up and has just good discussion with our applicants. That got vetted well with planning and zoning, all of that. It just leads to a better outcome and a better product. And it may be challenging at times for an applicant to go through those discussions and perhaps challenging for our staff too. But you all have a lot of professional experience, and I know our P&Z, and we certainly appreciate it. Some things come through and make projects better, and some things don't become part of a project, but the discussion is really important. And we all, in review of these applications, look at how those are discussed, how P&Z may or may not have addressed it, how the applicant may or may not have addressed it. So really appreciate the thoughtfulness in the staff report, Joe, and raising specific areas of your professional concerns. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from council. Sometimes it feels like bashing my head against a brick wall. So I appreciate it very much.
Council, any further comments? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Borton,
Aye.
Cavanagh,
Aye.
Burrow,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
Burnt.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Thank you very much. And Joe, you and me both will go bash our heads against the wall together later.
Thank you, sir.
Up next, ordinance, action item number 5, ordinance number 21-1915. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an ordinance related to H 2020-0083 Southridge South for rezone of a parcel of land in the northwest quarter of Section 23, Township 3 North, Range 1 West, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, establishing and determining the land use zoning classification of 36.04 acres of land from R4 medium low density residential zoning district to R2 low density residential zoning district to 7.15 acres, and R2 low density residential and R4 medium low density residential zoning district to R8 medium density residential district 28.89 acres in the Meridian City Code, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance and providing for a waiver of the reading rules and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Pearl.
I move that we approve ordinance number 1915 with a suspension of rules.
Mr. Mayor, second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion is agreed to. And the ordinance is approved. Council, anything under future meeting topics? Okay, item 6 was taken off the agenda, so it doesn't even exist. So with that, do I have a motion?
Mayor,
Councilman Burt.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, second the motion.
Motion and second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Aye.